We'll be looking at these games specifically for this video. All the gameplay shown will be at the beginning of these games, with no key gameplay moments. But if you want to avoid knowing anything about these games, then check out another video of mine instead. Elden Ring, the culmination of years of testing different creations from arguably one of the best individuals we have in the games industry at the moment. It took the gaming world by storm, selling 20 million copies in its first year of release. Shadows of the Erdtree, its upcoming DLC, is one of the most anticipated bonus content of recent years, with the subreddit now on full copium dissecting the recently dropped gameplay trailer. Elden Ring welcomed a lot of new fans to the Souls-like genre. Is it the most beginner-friendly of their Souls games, or is another one better suited for newcomers of the genre? Let me know what you think in the comments. FromSoft have earned a reputation in the industry for creating games that have quite a high skill barrier. Critics of FromSoft will say the games are unnecessarily difficult with bad game design, whereas fans will tell you to get good scrub, and they're not entirely wrong. The main problem people face when trying a From game for the first time is that they don't understand the genre. It's not about your mechanical skill or how well you play in other games. It's about understanding the fundamental gameplay elements of these specific games. Games over the years, in general, have gotten easier, with the hard difficulty just increasing the tankiness of enemies or decreasing loot drops. This has come about due to changing consumer demands, as well as developers focused on providing new content in order to make sales and retain its player base. Games in the past, such as Eco, Castlevania, and Ghosts and Goblins, had skill barrier built into them due to limitations in technology and game design. Now that we've got more options, game difficulty has become a bit lazy, and this is what your average modern gamer is used to. FromSoft have made a game that's psychologically rewarding. You have to discover what works with the tools you have, and there is always an answer. Whether it's singling out enemies one by one so you don't get overwhelmed, blocking and punishing attacks, or simply walking out of the way of a charge attack. These are just a few of the very long list of ways to deal with different encounters. The reason people can do level 1 playthroughs of the game is because they understand this and have worked out how each enemy works. FromSoft's games require a lot more knowledge than your standard AAA game, and it's something your average player isn't willing to learn. Until now. Elden Ring kind of went crazy on the sales, and in 1 year sold more units than Bloodborne and Sekiro's lifetime sales combined. Miyazaki has said that Elden Ring was a culmination of his previous ideas within games, and is the final product, with other games up until this point basically just being test runs. It adds the highs and lows of previous games, as well as introducing new tools and mechanics, but are they enough for new players of the genre? One thing I'd like to point out before we get into the positives and negatives is that we're talking about systems specifically around accessibility for beginners. We're not talking about fundamental or mechanical flaws. For example, a negative might be that a game has fast-paced combat. However, this could be a positive for a seasoned player. It's all about context. With Elden Ring combining ideas from the games before, it offers a lot of tools that can help beginners. Being the most recent game, it has more modern controls, so it's instantly easier to get a feel for, as it's more similar to other games out there at the moment. You have access to a jump, which may seem like a basic mechanic, however it's absent from other FromSoft games. Elden Ring benefits from being open world. If you get stuck somewhere, you have a plethora of other places to travel to. You aren't forced into linear storytelling, which can help a beginner go and get stronger elsewhere, rather than be beaten by a boss and quit the game. There's also multiple ways to progress within the game. For example, you only need 2 shard bearers to enter the capital. However, there's a total of 7 within the game. This means if you're stuck trying to get one, you can get another one instead. It also means there's a lot of optional content to complete to get stronger if you're struggling. Looking for ways to get stronger is consistent within Elden Ring, as you don't have to wander around aimlessly hoping you'll come across an item that might help. Healing upgrades are always found at churches, physique items at minor Erdtrees, spell slots at towers, and so on. It's also incredibly easy to navigate the world due to the map, and you can easily figure out where to teleport to due to the visual aid, in comparison to other From games. Something else they changed from previous games is that you now won't get invaded by another player unless a co-op summon is present, so now you don't lose progress because of someone else affecting your solo playthrough. Elden Ring heavily features spectacle within its boss fights. Visually, enemies are designed to look powerful with impactful attacks. They're found in grand arenas, each with their own epic soundtrack. Getting comboed to death by Godfrey looks awesome, and makes you want to go back for more. That's in comparison to previous games, where some boss experiences are lackluster, and getting bonked with a club 3 times doesn't feel very inspiring. Within fights, you have more tools to use, such as summons. These can help deal damage and take aggro off of you, giving more flexibility within combat. Elden Ring also has the highest variety of weapons, spells, and weapon arts within their games, with pretty much all of them being good options depending on your playstyle. If you find yourself not liking your build and where you've put your skill points, you can always respec. You're not limited in the endgame by a lack of knowledge in the early game. And if you die within boss fights, you now have Stakes of Marika to let you get straight back into the action, rather than run all the way through an area again. Elden Ring knows it's given you more tools to compensate for its combat encounters, as it features some of the hardest bosses in their games to date. Faster-paced enemies with shorter downtime between combos means a higher difficulty overall, and could prove a problem for new players. If Elden Ring is your first FromSoft game, it might also be your last. Going back to previous games after Elden Ring will be an experience, as it will take some getting used to the clunkier combat by comparison. Starting with a later game will mean you start with upgraded gameplay, and trying older games might feel like a downgrade. It genuinely feels like a struggle to come up with points that might make Elden Ring a bad first experience of FromSoft games. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any more. Demon's Souls is the clunkiest game by far, with unique but heavily flawed mechanics, like the world tendency system, that are counterintuitive and screw you over if you're having a hard time. It has the worst swamp level by far, healing is pre-Estus so you can run out and have to farm or buy more of it, you have item weight for every item in your inventory, and some bosses are basically 5 times harder if you don't exploit their weaknesses, so if you haven't figured it out, good luck. If you're new to Souls games, stay away from this one. In Dark Souls 1, bosses are slower and more predictable, giving more openings within fights. It also allows you to grasp the philosophy and game design behind FromSoft's games in a more controlled environment, compared to something like Margit in Elden Ring. There's also lower damage overall in comparison to other games, and the stat poise is a little broken in Dark Souls 1, letting you tank hits without staggering. Modern players won't be used to the clunky feel of the game, which can take some getting used to in itself, if they're not instantly put off by it. In Dark Souls 1, you can only roll in 4 directions: forward, left, right, and backwards. You won't roll on diagonals, which means you have to be more precise with your inputs to avoid rolling into attacks or off of cliffs. The resistance stat is also a massive bait within the game. Any player would think that, if you're struggling, it would make sense to increase your resistances with your hard-earned souls. This stat doesn't really make much of a difference though, so you're just going to be wasting levels. Dark Souls 3 is probably the most linear of the Souls games, so there's no guessing where you need to go next. One path will lead to another. The opening to the game is one of the best tutorials they've made, and really tells you what the game ahead will look like. In all of FromSoft's games, they always have that one boss or room that tests you on your skill and knowledge of the game so far. Dark Souls 3 is no exception, but the learning curve isn't as steep as other games. The gameplay feels more fluid to play compared to older games, making it easier to pick up for modern audiences. There are more spectacle fights, and you can respec too. In Dark Souls 3, the boss fights become a bit more chaotic, with late game bosses being lovers of combos, similar to Elden Ring. Linearity might also be a problem, as if you get stuck on a boss, you better believe you're going to be sitting there for the next however many hours trying to beat it, because there's no other way to progress. Bloodborne introduced a better game feel with faster flowing gameplay. The parry is the easiest to be successful with in From's games, with all weapons being viable to fit your playstyle. There's only one upgrade material, which helps simplify the game systems, as well as there being no carry weight, giving you something less to think about. Bloodborne is linear, which once again has its pros and cons. Every weapon is unique, healing is percentage based, the doll. More spectacle fights and a better roll are some of the benefits a new player might get. Although the healing is percentage based, you can run out of healing and need to go farm for more, which can really feel like a waste of time when you're used to the updated mechanics. The gem system can be a problem, and lead to weak builds, as the strongest gems are found deep in the optional dungeons. Also, not to be that guy, but when you're used to high monitor refresh rates, the game being 30 FPS can make Bloodborne feel less fluid, as well as making it harder to read attacks. Sekiro has great game feel, with very fluid combat. You also get a second life, meaning you can resurrect multiple times within the same fight. Fights have some good beginner mechanics. For instance, there's no chip damage when blocking, although you do now have a posture bar to manage. You know what kind of attack is being used by enemies, as certain moves get a warning, such as grabs. The prosthetic system can help you with certain attacks you struggle with, instead of having to learn them properly, which can save time and frustrations. After one of the early game bosses, 3 different paths open up to the player, so if you get stuck in one of those paths, you have other options on where to go. There's not necessarily any negatives here. However, Sekiro has a reputation within the Soulsborne community for being one of the harder games, even among veteran players. So I guess this is more of a warning to maybe get a bit more experience with the mechanics of From's games first. But everyone's different, so if you want to play Sekiro, you play Sekiro. The best FromSoft game for beginners. This answer will be different for everyone. For me personally, I find Elden Ring the best introduction to the series, as it has given me the tools to appreciate the level design, storytelling, and the soundtrack. My positive experience of Elden Ring made me want to try the previous games, as I'd gotten a taste of what FromSoft could do. I know this type of impression has happened with other franchises as well. My first experience of Resident Evil was RE7, and it got me hooked on the whole franchise. If I'd played them in order, I probably wouldn't have gotten past the first game, and written off the whole series. It's the same thing with FromSoft's games. That's just my personal journey though. Someone else might have a better time playing them in release order, as observing the evolution of the games in the order they happened might be a priority for them. Another person might prefer starting with the later games, as they have faster paced combat, and the game feel just clicks with them. There's no right answer here, but one thing that I do believe is important is to play the game that speaks to you the most. If you're interested in a game, that curiosity will drive you forward through your playthrough. If you couldn't care less about a game, then nothing is keeping you playing it when you start to struggle. And if you think that figuring out bosses and understanding the story through cryptic NPC dialogue and item descriptions isn't for you, then that's okay too. You don't have to like every game genre out there, and there's no reason to put yourself through hours of misery. If you got this far, thank you. Make sure to like this video to support the channel, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. See you in the next one.